like, okay, wait, why are these characters acting like this? This doesn't even make sense, especially one that we've spent the past, hour and 10 minutes with wouldn't make these choices.
I bind you
Driveby Movies, my name is Blaze.
My name is James.
And never have I ever seen The Craft.
The Craft. The Craft is about a newcomer to a Catholic prep high school and falls into a trio of outcast teenage girls who practice witchcraft, and they all soon conjure up various spells and curses against those who anger them. It is directed by Andrew Fleming, and it comes from the year 1996. Whew, I was a young one when this one came out, but it still holds up with a lot of people from my age group, as well as a lot of people from age group below us, honestly. Blaze, what made you want to watch The Craft?
I don't know why. I think honestly it was I was watching around Halloween time. I was watching the Eli Roth's History of Horror, and I think it's the second season. They had a whole big piece about The Craft even. So it was about witches, and they were talking about The Craft, and I was like, I actually haven't seen this movie. I've seen a lot of the classics and a lot of the mainstream horror movies, but The Craft is definitely a mainstream horror movie or genre movie that I hadn't seen. Felt like what better way to watch it here on Never Have I Ever. I have to say, this movie is definitely not made for me.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
The other thing I noticed while watching it, I fucking hate the 90s.
Good point too. Yeah, it has a very 90s soundtrack, a lot of 90s ideologies, and 90s frat guys who are in high school, of course. But yeah, I don't know. This movie is very 90s, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think it made me just realize how much pretty sure I hate the 90s. I'm actually glad that I was so young throughout the 90s that you didn't actually live them if you're a child. I feel like being a child is essentially timeless until you get technology. Then you're living in whatever time you're living in. But once I got my PS1, I was already at the 90s. So, or maybe it was 97 I got the PS1. So I was starting to leave the 90s and enter the 2000s at that point. But before that, I was just a child. I wasn't even aware of what was really going on in the 90s. Maybe I found out about Pokemon. I think that's about 99. But other than that, I didn't experience any of the whackness of the 90s that The Craft really introduced me to.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, with the 90s, everyone keeps talking about 90s fashion coming back. Not really, and I'm glad it's not, other than high-waist jeans. I know that's really popular currently, and that was kind of a late 80s, early 90s thing mainly, but it's still going on and right on. But what stands out mainly in this movie, though, what makes it so iconic is it's 4 goth girls. Well, it's mainly 3 goth girls, actually. One of them's kind of the newbie who, dabbles into the witchcraft stuff, but I wouldn't call her a goth, essentially. But there were some things I liked about this movie, but definitely agree with it wasn't made for me. I liked definitely the final 15-minute final confrontation scene. There's a lot wrong with this movie, and there's a lot I would love to see with the remake. And apparently we got a reboot sequel sometime last year. I forgot what it's called, The Craft Reborn or Rebirth Legacy or something. Apparently it's terrible. But there's a version I'd love to see, but I'd also like to hear more thoughts about what you thought about the movie too.
The Craft Legacies. It was a Blumhouse movie, came out this October or last October for Halloween. I haven't really heard anything about it. So
Blumhouse though, huh?
Yeah, I'm not really interested in checking that. I definitely feel like The Craft would be a movie that we could take on as sequel and create this whole, movie about how Fairyzabalk's character maybe escapes from the madhouse she's in, essentially, and indoctrinates some young Wiccans, maybe something like that. I feel like that's probably where they went with the movie, or it's like the kids of the original girls. I don't know, but that just the legacy gave me the vibe that it's the kids of the original girls. But maybe we'll have to check that out on another time. Probably a different show when that show comes back direct to dumpster. That's probably
that sounds fun. That's actually a great idea, because apparently an iconic movie got a long-awaited sequel that no one talked about.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, a lot of my coworkers, this is their go-to movie. This is like their Bible movie and stuff. Some of them have said this is their style, their fashion, like, is like all based off of this movie and stuff. And I watched this with my girlfriend. She loves she's a goth girl and she loves a lot of witchy things. So she was super excited watching this movie, and her kind of being hyped up kind of made me enjoy it a little bit more than you did, I think, at least. But what I wanted the whole time, though, is to see this movie get remade in the style of Suspiria or something. Like, not that Suspiria is like the best remake of all time, but I just loved how different it was. It's not at all the same movie. It didn't feel like it was trashing the original. Like, I liked that it was kind of its own thing that's way overly done, but I enjoyed it. I really like that, and I'd love to see The Craft kind of done that way and stuff. So, you know, give us a chance or something, or hopefully we get to see that someday. But I assume, though, the new one that just came out wasn't really all that. So, yeah.
I mean, the fact that no one's talking about it is probably the biggest warning sign that the new one is not worth watching, essentially. But anyways, getting into like the things I didn't really love about it. I mean, I understand that a lot of people connect this movie, so I don't really want to say anything more than it's not for me, I guess. A lot of things I didn't like was just that 90s sensibilities, especially the fact that this film is very, very tame, but yet it has an R rating, which I feel bad for the directors and the studio that were trying so hard to just get a PG-13, and the movie's basically a PG-13, but yet it was rated R by the MPAA. Absolutely ridiculous, and actually definitely might have, you know, hurt the movie at the time, because people have been like, I'm going to see an R movie, and then just feels it is basically a PG-13 movie. It's absolutely ridiculous. But I just felt like a lot of the characters' motivations weren't totally there, and that really sticks out in the last act, like the last 30 minutes essentially. Is you're so confused about why these characters are doing the actions in which they are, and they don't really make sense. They almost don't even feel like humans, that they're making like alien-like choices that have no rationale for any reason whatsoever, and just kind of really sticks out like a sore thumb. Like, okay, wait, why are these characters acting like this? This doesn't even make sense. Like a normal human would, especially one that we've spent the past, hour and 10 minutes with, wouldn't make these choices.
My exact problem with the movie. I asked, like, at the time, I was like, did I miss something? Like, why are they all of a sudden so damn evil? Like, I know that they were casting these spells and, like, some of them were working in their favor, but it didn't really, like, have, like, any kind of explanation, or just, like, no visible sign for why they would turn out that way and stuff. Like, I was just so confused and just like thought I missed something at the time, because all of them did this spell together. And I get the main girl like kind of changing persona just because she was possessed by this like crazy god spirit and stuff, but still it felt very over the top and out of the ordinary. And why like Neve Campbell like kind of started getting a little, she was the sweet one at first, the shy sweet one, then out of nowhere she's just like getting so over the top wild and crazy. Then at the end of the movie they try to like give like a peace sign and like kind of like bury the hatchet with the main character, and then they start making fun of her right when they leave, and then our main character like kind of shows them like, don't mess with me and stuff. Like, I don't know, there was just not a lot. Like, I felt like there was like a 20-page arc story that was like cut out or something.
It definitely this movie felt like it was like chopped to bits. And that's what I felt was the main problem with it, was the fact that stuff wasn't making sense, to the point that were they trying so hard to get this PG-13 that they were just straight up cutting stuff out that made parts of the movie absolutely not make sense. Because this felt like one of those movies that you watch where it was like, oh, this movie was a mess during the editing process because they were trying to get a certain rating. And then you go to watch it and it literally, parts of it just don't make sense. This,
Right.
obviously, the movie still made sense, but it's the characters' motivations and actions were making absolutely no sense, where you're like, okay, wait, why are they even like turning on each other? And then they're like, not, and then they have no really motivation to even turn on. It was just dumb. Like, it was that 90s
Yeah.
thing where it's like, in the 90s, movies, I don't know, were just stupid. And that was another one thing I hated about the 90s. So this was one where I'm like, I guess I can understand people feeling nostalgia for this movie, but it almost feels like the same when, I think it was one of your roommates back in the day showed you Halloween Town, which you hadn't seen that movie. It's a stupid Disney Channel original movie. So you had no attachment to it because you didn't see it as a child. And then you go and watch it and you're like, are you serious? Like, this is the movie you're telling me I need to watch? Like, I don't have it. Like, I'm an adult. This doesn't do anything for me.
Yeah, it's definitely like, hit the nail on the coffin with that description, because that's exactly how I feel about this movie. Like, I see why if a lot of people saw this at a younger age, like, I'm glad that you enjoyed it back then, but I guess I'm just too old, and I mean, movies definitely like made for like, like girls who like really like into this like kind of stuff, and I mean, of course, like men I'm sure are into this movie as well too, but it's just not the style of horror I wanted, essentially, and not the style of nostalgia I liked. Like a movie that we got introduced to, Can't Hardly Wait, that was like very 90s-esque, but I enjoyed that one and stuff, but just this one unfortunately just wasn't my style and just didn't work out for me, sadly.
Yeah, and I would say I think a lot of people attach to the things that they like about this film. You have these strong female protagonists. They're kind of banding together. Like, those are the things I liked. I liked the first beginning parts where they're all outcasts, but yet they're, collectively working together and, creating this kind of like family in a sense. Like, those are things I think people probably really attach to for this movie. I think they let the last 30 minutes in that last act slide because of how much they enjoy about the beginning of the film. The film does have a lot of style, which is cool, that not all films at that time had. But I have to agree with you. I think the saving grace for this movie and this type of movie could be, a remake or a reimagining of sense from a more talented director, maybe with a vision of what this movie meant to them, but like in a new age, essentially. And I don't think The Craft legacy is that, but maybe someday we'll get a film that has that whole sensibility that I think people enjoy about this movie, but they're willing to overlook its flaws.
Yeah, I think that is perfectly said. Like, it kind of reminds me of Tron or Waterworld, movies that had such great ideas and, had like the right style or maybe look, but just wasn't executed properly. And sadly, they're movies that still are remembered greatly for like nostalgia factors, and also because its story and visuals and characters were so memorable looking, at least. But not so much narrative wise. Like, I think if you talk to anyone about any of those movies and stuff, they'll always talk like kind of jokes about those two movies in particular. The Craft, I know, still has like a huge cult audience and stuff, but I just feel like we caught it at the wrong time. But but I see why so many people like this movie, though. I just would love to see it done by crazy director with a vision. Like, after seeing Promising Young Woman, I'd love to see that director, what she would do with The Craft or something. That's just an example, but
Most definitely. Yeah, I think giving a film like this a female voice, I know this, like, no shade on Andrew Fleming, the director of this film, but I feel like now in the 2020s, seeing a different point of view directing this movie and this style of movie, and not having those cheesy 90s CGI effects, I think would make it for me. For
sure. Yeah, but you can check out The Craft if you haven't seen it like we have. Check it out through our Amazon affiliate link in our description box below. It's a great way to help support us. Come back here, leave a comment telling us what you thought about the movie so we can keep the conversation going.
And if you guys haven't already, go ahead and smash that like button, hit the subscribe button, and click that notification bell to get all of our latest updates.
Also, if you can't get enough of us here on YouTube, we are also on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram. All our links are down below. Check us out there. And that's going to conclude Never Have I Ever this week. Tune in next week for a brand new video.